In the past, I used to be affectionate with the kids and give them a hug, but after Crucible and working into that, there was a holding. There was a longer, warmer, more compassionate, and a present hug.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hi and welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. I'm Martin Brooker, one of your Crucible Podcast hosts. I'm excited today to have two men, father and son, join us today on the show. Jaime Seegers is a pastor and a chaplain in the Australian Army, and he's here with his son, Jaime Seegers, who is an apprentice cabinet maker, both from Perth, Western Australia, both part of our worldwide community of the Crucible Project. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Martin. Great to be here.
Thanks, Martin. It's nice to be here as well.
Yeah, awesome. So, father and son, I mean, that we hear a little bit about that across the Crucible Project. Jaime, I'd start with you and just talk about how you found your way to your first initial weekend.
Martin, I think my way came through my own brokenness and a search for connection. And that came through a divorce that I went through many years ago, of which Jaime is one of the boys that came from that relationship. And being in ministry has its moments of quietness and loneliness that makes it difficult to, and challenging, I guess, to find a quietness in my head, so to speak. And being busy, particularly in church work, I received an invitation from someone to go and have a look at something different. And I guess that is what opened myself up to be willing to look at life from a different perspective. When I went through a divorce, it sort of was like first I'm putting on goggles and going underwater and seeing there's a whole different world that people live in, a broken world. And in that world, I've come to realize just how many people are in different ways struggling with brokenness, sin, addictions, etc., to make sense and to find their own identity. And so for me, it was just a simple invitation from someone who said, well, come and have a look. Come and have a look. And so my keenness for adventure and wanting to take a risk has immediately grabbed the opportunity, and I took 5 of my elders with me on the first weekend to go and check it out.
Yeah.
Let's go and see what's around the corner.
Yeah, awesome.
So that's how it happened for me.
Yeah, cool. I'll come back to what you got out of the weekend, but Jaime, you obviously went to a weekend as well, and I'm assuming it was a few years later. What was the catalyst for you?
Well, seeing as my dad was the local pastor, after he did the weekend, he started preaching about it, obviously some parts, and I was curious. Mm-hmm. And soon my older brother and a bunch of all the young men, they were older than me, attended the weekend, and I remember being curious, so what is this thing about? But obviously they couldn't tell me much because it's all about experiential. So I was always curious, and then I started seeing the way my dad and the other men, particularly Shannon and Athel, would lead the youth at our church. And it was different than what I've ever seen before. And I remember my dad and I went on a weekend together. I think I was 16 at the time. It was called the Passages of Right. I don't know if that's what it's called, but
the Rites of Passage.
The Rites of Passage, wrong way around. And I remember that was the starting journey of where I was able to actually have an authentic conversation with my dad about stuff I was struggling with, about my hopes and dreams. And it was different. My dad started to lead differently at church, but he also started to lead differently at home. And I was curious because I wanted something similar. And I was fortunate enough to have my older brother and my dad staff
Yeah.
my Crucible
Yeah.
weekend. So there's a lot more story, but the catalyst was that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, so look, guys, what did you find for yourself on that first weekend? I mean, you went with other elders, but you were there for yourself primarily, from what you said.
Martin, I wanted connection. I wasn't prepared for the level and the depth of connection that I would find. That certainly was refreshing and wild. I wanted connection. And so on the weekend, I think there are parts of myself that I have shamed, parts of myself that I have pushed away, and probably a deeper part of myself that was just unfulfilled. It's like there's got to be more. There's got to be more to faith, life, ministry, church life, family life. There's got to be more. So I was hungry. My soul was thirsting for more. And I guess what I really got out of the weekend was a connection that I can only describe as being found, not found out. As a kid, I was found out many times,
Yeah, yeah. Haven't we all done that?
but to be found with compassion,
Mm, mm,
that was something different.
yeah. And we talk about the Crucible Project of that radical honesty and grace, don't we? And that's the kind of environment you walk into.
Yeah, I've extended and I've given grace a lot of my life because it has come from a place of my own brokenness that I realize, that people are in need of grace, but I have not been very gracious to myself. I was exceptionally good at criticizing and faulting myself. Many of that happened automatically, happens subconsciously. And I guess that there was a lot of build up frustration that did leak out towards my family and those close to me. But I was longing, really longing for connection, and that's I think that's what I found. I found a way to build and to connect within brokenness, and yet have that radical honesty that Crucible is well known for. So I guess
Yeah.
that would sum up for me that I was found. The song "Amazing Grace." I was lost and now I'm
Yeah.
found. Right. I think
Mm,
that resonated with me, that I'm
yeah.
found, and the eyes, the men, the people that found me, accepted me, loved me, had compassion.
Mm.
That was significant to me. Yeah.
And I'm imagining, or the story I'm telling myself here is that as a pastor of a church, it can be pretty lonely. I mean, my background's Navy, and I'm the captain of a ship. I'm thinking it might be a little bit similar. That actually could be quite lonely there when you've got stuff going on, you've got your own stuff in your own world, and yet you've got to turn up, and there's a persona that you imagine you've got to be in that environment for the congregation or for your ship's company, as it was in my case.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that from a place of giving and constant giving, as a pastor, there were times that I recognized that my soul at times were feeling not empty, but it felt isolated and lonely. And maybe a bit like what the disciples at one stage said to Jesus, we've left everything to follow you. What's in there for us? There was that
Mm,
little part of myself that I guess wanted something tangible here on earth. I knew I had
mm,
grace from God. That was something that has always been with me. But to have here on earth, and particularly in the church, and even more so with elders, to have
mm.
that level of acceptance and grace,
Yeah.
that was just life changing.
I'll come back and talk about the men that you went with in a minute. Jamie, you went to your own weekend, and you know you'd seen sort of some change in your dad and your older brother. What was it like for you finally going into that weekend and having your own experience? And what did you find for yourself?
That's a very good question, and I've written a lot down on my phone to try and answer that question.
Right.
I think for me, I was struggling with a lot of relationships, whether it be friends at at school, friends at church, at home with dad and stepmom and all my siblings. It was, to me, it was about learning how to serve my relationships in a better way, but also finding a way to honor God and honor my family. And something had changed when I did my weekend, and I think I started taking responsibility for my actions. Because before I'd make up 1,000 excuses of it's not my fault or something like that. I remember when I started hearing about like accountability and integrity, and it brought me back to like one of the things my dad taught me after he did his weekend. He started talking about a brick wall. Every time I don't keep an agreement, I damage that brick wall. And then just to say I'm sorry, well, maybe there's a way to repair that brick wall and make it right. And so it was about preparing that brick wall as a metaphor with God, with any friends that I hadn't treated right, or people at church. And it was about trying to make sure that I live like that. It wasn't just like my dad that influenced me to go on the weekend. It was my two mothers as well, like my mom and my stepmom. They also supported me on the journey as well. And I'm very like tender-hearted towards them, because most young men don't have a father or a mother, and I've got one dad and two moms supporting me. So I felt very special, and I had a community of Christians and people that weren't even Christian but still supported me, and they were open to that. And I had this community behind me that whenever I would feel the big like weight of the world or these waves crashing on top of me, I knew that I was going to be supported and I'll be held afloat by God and by the team. Yeah.
It sounds to me like, what you found in that weekend was some principles there that now provide a really solid foundation for how you turn up in the world, Jamie.
Yeah. When I was 16, I realized that I wanted to be what type of man I wanted to be at school, at sport clubs, at work, and at church. And I realized that I wanted to be a young man of robust courage and determination.
Well, I honor you for that, because I think back to when I was 16 and that was not in my head, I can assure you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, you staffed the weekend, but more importantly, you came home from that weekend as father and son with a similar experience, and your other son as well. What is the experience of Crucible meant to you as father and son? I might start with you guys.
Martin, I probably would describe my relationship with my dad as one that was very formal, very little affection, and probably lacking honesty. And I guess I was never introduced to the idea of having a close connection, not particularly like a friend, like a buddy, but a mentoring friendship relationship with my dad. I just never had that. I did not take my problems or issues or challenges to my dad. And coming to think of it, most of the male role models in my life probably weren't approachable. I'm not saying that they weren't there. I'm not saying that they weren't good, but they weren't approachable. I wanted different. I wanted different for myself, for my relationship with Jamie and Jesse, with my three other kids as well. So I wanted to be in on their life, and not in on just the good things. I wanted to be in alongside them when life gets muddy and when it gets difficult. That to me is the essence of what I know Jesus is for me. Is the God with us, with me in my brokenness. And I wanted to be following him in that too. In other words, if I'm following Jesus and he is with my son, my children in their difficulty, why am I not then there either? If he's then with them and I'm a follower of him, then I should be too. And the question for me was, am I too scared to move into that space? Am I too judgmental to not venture into that unknown world. It's my comfort zone to secure that I don't want to leave that. And those were,
Mm.
and I think for me, there were voices probably from childhood that were either quiet, weren't there, and judgmental voices that made it just challenging for me to recognize there could be safety, more connection,
Yeah.
more affection by
Yeah.
moving closer into that rather than further away. And so, probably the most mind blowing sort of revelations to me was when David writes in the Psalms, that God is close to the brokenhearted, and finding ways and means to be trusted enough to get that close. I love that idea because I know that that's what God
Mm.
was for me, and I wanted to be
Yeah.
that for my children as well, and for my wife. Yeah,
Yeah. So I think it's that experience, isn't it, of that weekend and Crucible Project as a community that sort of gives us another source and resource for how we turn up in the world, not only as Christians, but also in that role that we have as the father of the house or the father of children. And let's face it, like many of us have not had the best role models when it comes to that. And our parents do the best that they can,
yeah, exactly.
but it's actually being able to go into this at later in life, whether it's as an older person or even at the age of 18, it's like it's some great grounding for life in general. As you say, dealing with the stickiness, the muddy stuff that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and in one way, like when I looked at how Jesus connected with people, sinful people, sin. It was okay to go, well, yes, that's Jesus, and those were his disciples. They were in immediate contact with him, and he taught them. But Crucible gave me the real life experience that it is possible to
Yes.
have that kind of level or depth of honesty and grace,
Yeah.
and to remain connected and to trust that, and it's probably a blind trust, a trust that I will be okay. We will be better.
Mm.
We will see each other through. We will not judge. We will actually bring compassion and grace. Yeah, that was just a real life experience of the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I guess reminded of the safe place that those weekends are.
Mm.
And that's exactly what Jesus created when he was with people too. Jamie, if I can come to you and talk about what it was like coming back. I mean, you already had a little bit of exposure of, Dad having made some shift and changes as a result of his own weekend. But once you'd actually had your own weekend, what was it like coming back into family and having, I guess, new language and skills around this?
Well, I remember Athel walked up to me, and I'd never met him before at all. And so my brother and I are eating lunch at church, and he walks up to me, sits down, looks at me. He does his thing. He looks at me and he says to my older brother Jesse, "Do you think he's ready?" And now I'm busy eating food, and I'm looking at my brother, going, "Who is this old dude? I don't know him at all." I'm wondering what is he going on about. And once I'd done my weekend, I realized what he's talking about the journey that continues. And
Mm.
so one of the things coming back is about a community, and you said it once, and my dad said it twice already. And my dad being a pastor at North Beach and having Shannon and Athel support him, the three of them were like, in my own saying, was like Isaac, uh, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were like the cornerstones of North Beach, but in TCP. And so I
Yeah.
watched them mentor the young people, including myself. And so I think it was the ongoing support after that really made a difference. But I did my weekend in 2015, and I still have support from those three men. And it's been like 8, 9 years later. And over the 12 years that that I've been in Australia, my dad has built a legacy at North Beach that has reached over 65 young people in the span of 12 years.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a God moment because I believe they all touched a piece of destiny with God, including myself. And it was
Yeah.
because we found that safe place, and we were able to, as a youth group, give grace and receive grace. And I think during the weekend and coming back to a youth group like that made all the difference in my life. Because if that wasn't there after the weekend, I think that probably me falling back to old habits or going down the wrong path of life would have been more likely. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I fell
Yeah.
back into a community of support after.
Yeah. Guys, you and I have discussed this before. The fact that Crucible is, non-denominational ministry, but it adds so much can add so much value to a church, to a community.
Yeah.
Brings other gifts into that can really strengthen that community and the way in which they turn up.
Martin, so true. We came back, the six of us came back from that weekend. That very first day at church, we were in the foyer and we hugged each other and welcomed people in a different way. There was a connection and a flow of spirit and energy with us that on that first day already people were going, what the hell happened? Where have you guys been? And I must say that, Martin, many changes. We played with Crucible ideas and principles and stories, and then made them personal into some of the biblical stories, tested them.
Mm.
And we did that in our prayer groups, we did that in our men's group, I did that in sermons. And it was like there was something that was coming alive. There's a humanity. And it's not just the part of humanity that is broken and that needs fixing, but it's the beauty of humanity. It's the blessing
Yeah.
side of humanity. So that's the other side of the coin, is the connection that is so incredibly beautiful. And I guess for the first time in ministry, I was able to not just bring compassion or bring a story or make a story alive and help build connection, but I was willing to insert my own emotion, my own brokenness
Mm.
into a story and into a sermon or into a crucible meeting, and at the same time bring an awareness that God's grace is of such abundance that
Mm.
I am safe, that we
Yeah.
can be safe, that
Yeah.
we are in God's care and God's hand. And so
Yeah.
I felt like I was dropping with heart and emotions into Crucible and into the church like I've
Yeah.
never done before. Yeah.
Look, I love that so much because that's also been my experience, is the fact that, you go to that weekend almost expecting that nobody could love you the way you are for the things you've done, the sin you might have committed,
Yeah.
the challenges you have in your life, and yet you find that grace
Mm.
and honest with yourself,
Yeah.
and from that process allows you to come back out of that weekend
Mm.
with the ability to actually have those conversations with the people that are important to you, to actually talk about some of the things that you had never been able to talk to them about, knowing that you're safe and that you're supported.
Yeah. And I think the most significant thing that I wanted was to build that different connection with Wendy, my wife, and our kids, and to be able to look my kids not just in the eye, but merely like through their eyes into their soul and into their heart, and
Mm.
to hold that, to hold compassion, and the way that what that symbolized to me, for me personally, when I think about it, is in the past I used to be affectionate with the kids and give them a hug, but after Crucible and working into that, there was a holding. There was a longer, warmer, more compassionate, and a present hug
Yeah, yeah,
that that made me feel that this is belonging. This, you are welcome. This is world. This is, I want to be in this world. Um,
yeah,
that's what I wanted for my family, and that's still growing. That's a place where
mm.
I feel I feel I can bring my brokenness too, and and where my children can love and hold grace out for me and call me out.
Mm.
And I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that is their love when they call
yeah.
me out.
That's so powerful to be able to let your kids do that, isn't it? To
Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, we met actually when I went and did my initial weekend, which was actually just about a year ago.
Yeah.
But what I have noticed about you is that as a young man, you have stepped up in leadership at such a young age, and in a community, and with people that are much older than you. But I'd love to tip in just a little bit about what have you found for yourself as a leader being in this community beyond your weekend?
It's definitely been challenging. I think because I started the journey at 16, like 2 years before the weekend actually happens, I by the time I went to the weekend, I could have caught on small parts of it, but obviously didn't know nothing. I knew what type of man I was, but I didn't know what type of man I needed to be in the coming years. So afterwards, I was very eager to jump on the leadership wagon and going, yes, I'm in. Give me leadership roles. And I think I scared the leadership because, like, being so young, they would have gone, this is not normal. Like, grown men,
Sure.
older men in their like 40s and their 50s run away from this. Why is a young 18-year-old want to do this? And so I think I've given them a run for their money ever since.
Yeah, good on you.
And it's been hard because I've had to learn to be patient. And that, like, as a young man, that I can't, being patient has served me well because I think in the last 2 years I've learned about an appropriate type of leader.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see the example of Jesus, like he was a leader in his 30s, and he had a career as a carpenter, and he had moved on to that next stage of life to where he could
Yeah.
teach people and people would listen. And as an 18-year-old, no one's gonna really listen to me. So I had no authority really. I had no audience that I could captivate. And over like the last 8 years, I've been trying to build a vision for others to follow. And in the last 2 years, it's just kicked off, and it's been a hard journey, but it's
Yeah.
been worth it because I have learned how to be a leader in the Crucible, at
Yeah.
home, with my relationships, with God. And so the journey of leadership is just one of encouragement that I feel, but it's one that I know that I'm destined to do, and I don't want to do it alone. And that's the good thing about doing it with like my father over like the
Yeah.
last 8 years, like 7 years, is that
Yeah.
I've been, hey dad, I'm kind of stuck, and he'd go, maybe think about this, and I'd be like, you genius. So there's always been this back and forth between me and my dad about how much adventure and fun we can have with leadership.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I know the love you have for your father, but I can also, from witnessing you in leadership roles in Crucible, what I can acknowledge is the fact that you do stand on your own, and
yeah,
despite your younger age, you have no problem in standing up for what you think's important and standing in your own truth and the truth that is relevant for that moment. So that's a powerful outcome for somebody so young. So well done.
yeah. Thank you. It's been another aspect of like one man said, "Step out of my dad's shadows," and I sort of liked that idea because I find my own confidence and who I am and how I want to lead. Having had a good example, maybe I can do better. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's always the hope.
You're good.
But
Yeah.
I have a certain standard, and so
Yeah.
I think being acknowledged as a leader now in the
Yeah.
Crucible community has been inspiring.
Well, I think there's an opportunity not only in the Crucible because you're both involved and as is Wendy, your wife, guys, but there's also generational family leadership as well, which I think is obviously a benefit of this as well. We're going to wrap up now, but I just wanted to get some final words of your thoughts of, if somebody was thinking about going to the Crucible weekend for themselves, what would you say? What words of encouragement might you give them?
The thing that I probably would sell is the part that you don't know. The part of myself that I did not know. I would not have wanted to live without that for the last 10, 12 years. If I think about life without that, I would describe my life as poor.
Yeah.
And I had a really good life. There wasn't particularly any major issues that I carried with me. Many, baggage from the relationship, the failed relationship, etc. But life was going well. And so I would say to somebody that's thinking about it, there's more to life than you can even begin to imagine. I think that when Paul writes about this and he says, what has not yet entered the mind of man, what has not even come up for you, that is what God has prepared for those who love him, right? And so I think that this is a piece of that. I think this captures a piece of something that is beyond imagining. And there is a depth that I have now seen hundreds and hundreds of men that they didn't even know existed, was possible.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the part. There's more to you. There is more. There's not more to life. We all know there's more to life. Go for traveling and holidaying, and there's more to life. A different job.
Yeah.
But there's more to you.
Yeah.
There's so much more to you. And I think that that's probably the thing that I would hold out to someone and go, come and discover more of you, on a Crucible weekend. And you'll get to discover more of me too, the rest of us too. Yeah.
Awesome. And Jamie, you're an encourager of young men and women going to Crucible weekends. What would you say?
I got to speak from my own experience. And doing my weekend helped me see people for who they really are and really listen. I think often I often interrupt and overspeak my turn. And I learned at the Crucible how to keep quiet, let someone else speak, and just be there for them. And I learned that one of the most important, valuable skills in communicating, and that is how to read people with their emotions and their body language. And I think that as a young person trying to discover the world, knowing my own purpose in life, my own mission, and knowing who's in my corner as a cheerleader made the difference. And I would say that being real and authentic is struggling when everything tells me not to. Yeah. So I would say that the weekend upholds integrity, and even if I fail and make mistakes, there's always grace given. There's accountability given, but there's also grace, and they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So
what I'm hearing really is that it's accelerated your ability and a way of being as a man, and setting that the standard you want for yourself and what your expectations are of yourself, and being supported around that, knowing that if you fail, there are people that will continue to hold you up.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing is learn to see people instead of making judgments.
Yeah.
And as a young person, that's really easy to make judgments about most people. So learning really how to see someone's true heart, like I can see my dad's true heart, learning how to see it and recognize it, that's the gift.
Yeah. You don't need to be young to have judgment, I can assure you. Anyway, gentlemen, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And look forward to catching up with you guys sometime soon, whichever coast of Australia it might be on.
Thanks, Martin. Bless you and your family.
Bless you too.
Around you as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin, for the time. Appreciate it.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.